What is up, all you random people on the internet? We are back here on Everything EOS, and we have got a fire episode for you all this weekend. We talk Rex4All, Referendum, virtual reality, Decentralized Uber, and the path to mainstream adoption. Everything EOS is made possible by my core sponsor, Cypherglass, and today's episode is also being brought to you by pixEOS, where games and art collide.
As internet culture and the digital age continue to grow and expand, more and more of our communication is done through some form of online art. How many times a day are you sending GIFs and memes to your friends and family? With pixEOS, digital artists can create original pieces of work and convert them into non-fungible tokens that can be bought and sold online. Just imagine if you're the artist who creates the next famous internet meme and you've got the original to prove it. Using the pixEOS Gallery and pixEOS Art House, creatives can publish their art and even get commission requests for visual arts and creative media services. Head over to pixeos.io to see the featured artists already displaying their work. Get in on the art gamification platform that's changing the future of digital art. pixEOS, where games and art collide.
What's going on, everybody? We are so glad you're back. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, or leave a 5-star review depending on where you are watching and listening. But let's go ahead and jump right into it.
All right. So last week's episode, we did it again, Rob. We do an episode about something that needs like the last couple of votes for, and then before we even get the episode out, it happens.
Yeah.
So referendum has passed. So what's that mean to you as a block producer?
Yeah, so referendum is basically a way of just determining what the EOS token holders actually want the block producers to do. So it's kind of a way of decentralizing governance from those, top 21 block producers out to any single person that owns an EOS token. So if you have 10 EOS tokens, you can vote on different polls and different referendums to basically say, hey, yes, I do want this thing to happen, or no, I do not want this thing to happen. So it's an awesome way to have your voice heard within the EOS community on important issues.
If we want to make a system-wide change, like a constitutional change, where we want to move funds or change a governance rule, that would require a referendum, and then that would signal to the block producers what the token holders want. And then from there, hopefully 15 out of the 21 actively producing block producers would approve whatever code was required to implement the referendum. And the code's an important part, and we'll get into that with the proposals in a bit. But what's required to pass the referendum is it requires a minimum of 15% participation. So there's about 906 million circulating tokens if we exclude block 1, but let's, for simplicity, say 1 billion tokens. So at minimum, 150 million tokens are going to either vote yes or no on a proposed referenda. And then the other rule is that there has to be at least a 10% advantage between the yeses and the nos. So let's use the example of 150 million tokens. We would need at least 10% of those tokens to be voting yes, and we would also want 5% of those tokens saying no. So it's really interesting, Rob. What do you think about the fact that it's almost good? If you want to pass a referendum, sometimes it's good to have people voting no. Isn't that it?
Oh, definitely. Well, and that was the biggest part that I was confused on that I actually got wrong in the video. And thanks to Josh from EOS Canada for pointing that out and helping me add an annotation to the video to correct it. But essentially, you can just think as long as 55% of all of the tokens voted towards a proposal are voted yes, it will pass, assuming there are 150 million tokens or more voted towards it. So that's the 10% difference, like 55 and 45. I originally thought it was more of a 2/3 vote. But yeah, that's kind of the way it works.
So the 30-day continuous day is important too, because you have to maintain that advantage. So at least 150 so if it drops below 150 million tokens, even for a block or a day, then it starts over. Is that correct as far as you know?
Yeah, as far as I know, that's correct. EOS Canada's FAQ is like their frequently asked questions page is probably the best place to answer any of these questions if you guys are want to really dive deep on it. But that's the way I understand it. So you need those 150 million tokens. You need at least 55% of those tokens voted yes, and then in addition to that, they have to stay voted yes with that many tokens voted towards it for 30 days consecutively for it to actually pass. It is possible, however, it's good to note, because this doesn't really require or force the block producers to act in one way or another. Obviously, the block producers should act in the interest of the token holders and do what they want. But assuming, let's say, it got to day 29 and then all of a sudden, a big whale removed their vote and it dropped below, so we didn't quite hit that 30-day mark, the block producers could still go out, 15 out of the top 21 could go out and say, hey, we're going to push this through anyway, because clearly there was enough community support for, 29 days or whatever it was.
I'd personally love it if that happened, because that's showing initiative. And I think there's been a lot of walking on eggshells among a lot of the block producers, and probably for good reason. No one wants to lose their position by pissing the wrong people off. But I think with the referendum, in the situation you explained, would be, it would give them more. It doesn't give them official authority, but I think from a community standpoint looking in, it would be more acceptable if they took the initiative to make a major system-wide change if it was just so like a hair away from passing a referendum, but something weird happens that makes it not pass.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's only been, the referendum's only been live since what last Thursday or Friday? We're recording this on Wednesday.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it went live the very next day as you were editing. So as is the case with all of these. It's only been around for a little while, but we've seen pretty good voter participation. Do you want to walk through some of the existing referendums?
I was going to ask you what you thought about the participation so far. Is it doing better, worse, or about what you expected after a week?
Honestly, I think it's about what I expected for a week, maybe a little bit better. I think a lot of people are kind of very pessimistic, like, oh, we're never going to get 15% of the tokens out to vote. If that was the case, we wouldn't have a mainnet right now, because I think a lot of people forget that we needed 15% of tokens back then before anybody really knew what wallet to use, before anybody really knew how to send a transaction. Before all of this infrastructure was in place, we managed to get 15% of all token holders to vote to actually unlock the mainnet. So I think now, considering the amount of people that have their wallets set up, the amount of people that use their wallets on a daily basis, I think it's going to be, maybe quicker to get some of these referendums passed than that initial vote to unlock the mainnet. But for a week, it's going to take a lot of education, because I think right now a significant portion of the EOS token holders still don't know that this tool even exists. If you're not keeping up in Telegram every single day, checking the news, if you're not watching this podcast every week, you should be. But if you're not, then you don't even know something like this exists. So I think it's going to take a little while for this to get out there. But with that being said, if we look at, the top proposal right now, which is decaf, to basically remove ECAF from power, they're 10% of the way there to, out of 100% to get to their 15%. So they basically have that 1.5% out of the 15% voted already, which looks like almost 15 million EOS are already voted towards this proposal. So that, I think, is pretty great for less than a week, when most people don't know it exists. Most people are kind of waiting to see what happens. And I think this will only increase, over the next week as more and more people get educated.
One reason a couple of these top proposals we're going to discuss today, one of the big reasons that they got so many votes so quick is because a few major proxies voted on them. Right. So I see on the delete ECAF, investing with a difference, investing WAD username, that's 631,000 EOS. Luke EOS proxy, which is 1.3 million EOS Titan vote. So there's some big accounts. So it's not it's a lot of token holders if you include the ones that are proxying to the proxy. But overall, it's probably, I don't have a number in front of me of how many actual accounts voted if you only count a proxy as one account. So there's still a lot of education to do. But I think it's pretty good, though, for just a week. And like you said, your average token holder probably isn't in Telegram as frequently as some of the people watching the show are, especially as we are. So did you vote on that one yet? Are you in favor of deleting ECAF?
I am in favor of deleting ECAF. Yeah, I definitely am.
just clarifying. So we'll get into a little bit about what's included, what needs to be included for a referendum to pass and actually get implemented, and that's going to be the code. Yeah. But on something like this, would this just be amending the Constitution, essentially? Because ECAF, what code exists to provide ECAF authority? Or is it mostly just constitutional?
Yeah, right now I think it's only constitutional. So I mean, you could remove that article from the Constitution, but I think what this would do more than anything is, most block producers right now are not processing any requests from ECAF because the token holders have kind of said to all the block producers, hey, this is a potential centralized attack vector. It's a centralized part of the system. We don't really want this. So the block producers haven't really been enforcing ECAF's power anyway. But assuming this passes, it will kind of send a signal to all the block producers, including the ones who haven't come out, against it or for it, basically saying, hey, you don't have to worry now. Don't approve any of the ECAF stuff because the token holders have explicitly said not to. So it should just give more clarity to everybody that's, involved in this system.
So the second most highly voted referendum is the one that we actually want to recommend to everyone watching this to vote on. I think the Rex4All proposal is by far the best proposal currently on the referendum. You want to introduce what it is to everybody?
Yeah, so Rex4All, just like we talked about, when the block producers are going to touch any kind of funds on the mainnet, they need to get the token holders' approval. It's really something that has to happen. Rex4All will basically take all of the fees in the EOSIO RAM fees account and in the name bidding account, which is all the premium names like .xyz, .vr, .com, things like that. It'll take all of those fees that are in these system accounts and redistribute it to people who are, staking their tokens to Rex, who are voting for a specific number of block producers, which I think is yet to be determined. Right now, actually, in this proposal, it says it will be for people who just lend or borrow CPU and net resources. So I think those that are lending into it will get a percentage of those fees based on how much EOS they actually lend into the system. So it's basically that proposal. If you saw our EOS AMA on the Cypherglass channel with Kevin Rose from EOS New York, he was talking about, hey, the first proposal is essentially, do you want free money? This is the proposal that we're voting on. Just pretend the title says, do you want free money? Vote approve, and hopefully we can get to the point where this will pass and we can implement this, because Rex is going to bring so many benefits other than just free money to people. It should do a lot for the network and the resource allocation overall.
I agree. So I think that's a good way to explain it to people is, do you want free money? Yes or no?
What's interesting about this Rex proposal, titled Rex4All, is that they actually have the code in there that the block producers need to implement. So with a lot of these referendums, it's sort of unclear, if this passes, it's like, okay, well, what code do we push? What do we do? But fortunately, the Rex4All has very clear instructions to the block producers that if this passes, hey, this is the variable you need to change in the code to make something like this possible. So a huge shout out to the person that, or persons, I don't know, that actually proposed this Rex proposal, because they did it the right way. They included code, included very clear instructions, and it's in multiple languages, English, Chinese, and Korean, which I think is great to include everybody in the EOS community in these votes.
So that brings us to the third current most popular referendum at the time of this recording, and that is, because of Brendan Bloomer talking about it recently, should... I don't know. This wouldn't even be here. This wouldn't even be a thing if that wasn't mentioned like a week or two ago. But anyway, should the voting weight be changed to one token, one vote? And it has incredible support. At the time of this recording, 94% are voting yes and 6% are voting no. And there's 11.6 million votes for that. Now, it's basically just an idea that's proposed to referendum is, do you want this? Sure. But hypothetically, let's say this is the first referendum to pass, and I hope it's not. What happens next? So it gets to 150 million votes, more than 10% of them are yes. Now the block producers all look at each other and they say, well, how do we actually implement this? Because there's no code associated with this. It hasn't been tested. It hasn't been audited, like security audited. So that's what's wrong with some of these referendums, and there needs to be an educational component. That's what we're going to trying to do today, to let the general community know of the right way and the wrong way to propose a referendum if you want to propose anything yourself. I'm going to mess his name up here. Brandon Espinoza from Strongblock, he actually put out a really, really good document called The Best Practices for Writing a Referendum. It's like 16 pages long. But if we want to take this type of governance serious, we have to be serious with our proposals, because it's going, I believe if this one token, one vote were to pass, that it's going to be a doomsday scenario, and we're going to see all the Cointelegraph and Coindesk FUD saying that everyone wanted to change something and the block producers refused to. But it's not that they refuse to, it's because we don't have the code, it hasn't been tested, and I think it would just cause a big issue. What do you think?
Absolutely. And there were other proposals I saw too, not just the one token, one vote, which is, the third most popular referendum right now, or I guess you could call that one a poll since there are really no specific instructions. But somebody on Twitter, I forget who it was, basically had like this complex feature request like, hey, do you think we should add this feature to the mainnet? And while it was a cool feature and I was like, yes, this makes sense, it was like, well, how are you going to implement that? Have you written the code for it? Are you proposing that, the block producers allocate funding to it through the worker proposal system? And if so, that should really be for that future system, not the referendum. So I think when you're out there, if you're thinking about doing a referendum proposal, first, of course, read that document from Brendan Espinoza and the other guys in there who made that document possible. But in addition to that, just think, how is this going to be implemented? Do I have the code ready for this to be implemented? If not, maybe it's not time to propose that referendum. Maybe you need to go work with a developer or go about it in some other way so that, if you get that 15%, of votes on your proposal, if it actually passes, that's pretty significant. And you don't want that to be wasted because you didn't write the proposal correctly in a way that it can actually be implemented. So just make sure you're writing it correctly so that when you do get those votes, boom, the instructions are very clear and that can go live on the mainnet and actually be put into place instead of just kind of tossed out.
Agree fully.
Yeah.
So that's why we like the RAM fee and the name auction fee, the Rex4All. But as we're talking about this, Rob, I actually thought of something. It might be included in the Rex4All, but I haven't read all the code. So the number 4 proposal right now says, should we burn accumulated unused inflation, which is the 4% of inflation that sits in EOSIO.savings? And a lot of people are in favor of that. I'm still undecided on voting for that one.
Same.
But it reminded me of the EOSIO.names account and the EOSIO.RAM fees account has a shitload of EOS in it right now. Does that proposal mention what we're going to do with the EOS that's already in it? Because it'd be like a windfall of EOS. Like you couldn't just
I think that's the point. I think basically whoever would be staked in that first round of Rex, like that first 30-day Rex, I think would get a significant amount of EOS, which is why if something like that passes, we should see voter participation skyrocket as well. And, staking amounts skyrocket because as everybody's coming in and leasing to Rex, trying to get that big payout, because it would be pretty significant for everybody that was involved.
I love that idea. Is that part of the proposal? Because I haven't even dug into it that far.
It doesn't should future EOS tokens. It says should future. Okay, so that's interesting. So reading the actual proposal, it says specifically, should future EOS tokens sent to EOSIO RAM fee and EOSIO names be allocated to Rex? But it's unclear, to your point, would they be burning that? Would that go away? Would it be a big windfall? My initial understanding was that it would be a big windfall for everybody who comes in on the first one, but this proposal looks specifically for future EOS tokens, not any of the ones that are in those accounts now, which is kind of interesting.
I kind of like that because it's less controversial, because then we could decide what to do with the lump sum sitting in the account later. We can get this faucet turned on for the Rex and then deal with these additional funds later. Maybe we do want to burn them, but maybe we want to say, hey, we're going to go on a month-long communication campaign to say stake to the Rex because we're going to drop all this bonus fees on this date.
Absolutely. Well, that'll make more sense to give people time so that it's not like, hey, you have a day to get in this first round. Like, you better stake your tokens, better hope they're ready to go. Whereas, like, you give people more time and then you can do that big windfall later. Or, to your point, I mean, that could be burned. It depends on what the users vote on.
Yeah, so I guess let's ask the community, like, what do you think should happen? So everyone is in favor of Rex4All that I know. But what do you think we should do with those additional funds? Should we burn them? Should we give them as an airdrop, or not an airdrop, but like a bonus? Or what should we do?
Yeah.
Let us know.
Well, I saw it. It was funny. I saw an interesting other proposal in here that said, basically, instead of burning the 4% inflation that's accumulated in the EOSIO.savings account, they were proposing that we evenly distribute it to all EOS accounts based on how much EOS they hold.
Goodness.
So that would be a massive windfall. But I am so against that because that would do horrible things to the token price and volatility and everything. So that's kind of a bad idea in my opinion. But
so the last thing I wanted to discuss on referendum is actually a proposal that was made by Brandon Espinoza, who's the one we mentioned earlier, who wrote the best practices for writing referendum. He's with Strong Block. He was a former governance something or other at Block 1 prior to mainnet launch. But the Worker Development Fund, or EOS Commons Development Fund, it's not really being supported right now. But I believe it's because of a communications issue. Did you get a chance to read about it at all? You want to explain it to everyone?
I haven't. So I understand what they're doing, and I can give the overview. But before I vote on this, I need to look more into the budget and the proposal, because it's very, very detailed in terms of what they would actually use the funding for. But essentially, they're trying to do a smaller version, like sort of like a test version of the Worker Proposal Fund, by taking 1 million EOS out of the, I think, 22 million EOS that have accumulated in the EOSIO.saving account. That's that 4% inflation that's currently unused. There are some proposals voting that we burn that, but this proposal is saying, hey, let's do a test before we dismiss worker proposals completely. Let's take 1 million EOS out of there, put it into this fund, and then use that to, establish a committee and have people that vote on the different worker proposals that are proposed and all kinds of different stuff. So that overall concept I'm in favor of, because I think I would personally love to see, will those 1 million tokens just get, stolen by whales who are voting on these worker proposals in a bad way, or will they actually go to real projects? And I would love to see that. Before I vote yes on this proposal, however, I do want to go through and review the budget to make sure that this isn't just something where the committee is taking all the money out of it, and then only, a small portion of that will actually go to the token holders. Based on the people that have proposed this, I doubt that's the case. But of course, before we deal with moving 1 million EOS, we definitely got to go through and read the budget before it's voted on. But once I take a look at that, I'll definitely vote one way or the other.
So I actually had an episode one week when you weren't available. I did it with Josh Kaufman from EOS Canada and Kevin Rose from EOS New York back when we were just audio.
Oh, yeah.
And it was specifically on the worker proposal system, which I was completely for at that time, but I was never certain about all 4% of the inflation going towards it. And
right.
And then I think Dan or Block One, someone came out from Block One and kind of said they wouldn't. What did they say? Do you remember? Like they wouldn't support the mainnet if it implemented the WPS or something crazy?
Not explicitly. That was kind of like the FUD associated with it, but they said something along the lines of like they weren't in favor of it. Brendan has recently come out and says he doesn't want it at the base layer, which something like the Commons Development Fund, I don't think. Well, technically, I guess it is at the base layer because it's using base layer inflation, which is what everybody is against. People are saying you should get that money from somewhere else or use inflation from your, dapp specific token or whatever it may be. So that I think is the biggest point of controversy here.
Right now, I'm not really sure if I am for or against this Commons Development Fund program, but I've always been in favor of a WPS-like system. I just want to discuss it, research it, and make a decision after that. And I haven't had enough time, like you said, to research and look into this. Today, it seemed like in the EOS Proxies channel, there was a lot of talk about this. And I think on Ash Oro's show on EOS Radio, they're going to bring on a group of people to discuss this. So I don't know when that's going to be scheduled, but I'll be tuning in because I respect Brandon. And I'm really curious to learn more about this proposal from the people who proposed it.
Definitely. And speaking of this House Commons Fund, it looks like EOS New York actually put out a recent alternative to it. Basically, instead of taking that inflation like we were talking about and making it a base layer thing, EOS New York is instead proposing that we do it in a volunteeristic manner. So that basically means that you would have people volunteer to contribute money to this system to fund, different projects, maybe different projects that don't have a revenue model, whatever it may be. It would be a more volunteer style approach. What do you think of that, Zack?
I think so. It'd almost be like a bounty program. So you'd post a bounty of something that you wanted to build that needed funding, and I think people would basically make donations in EOS towards specific projects. Is that how you interpreted it? And it was modeled after something that the Monero community has done. Kevin, in his article, he linked to this Monero fund. And I was looking at the completed tasks on the forum that they post these bounties on. And it's not a lot of money. I don't have the math in front of me, but the projects that were funded were like 72 Monero, 47 Monero, 67, 45. The 45, I think, was the highest one. I don't even know what the price of Monero is, but I don't think it's like more than $200. I think it's a lot less.
Yeah, I can
probably
check
like
for
$100.
$45.
Ooh. I don't know the dates of these fundings, so it might have been higher when they were approved, but it's not a lot of money.
Right.
So I think that it's a great idea. It's not as controversial as a WPS. So one way or another, we have to have some sort of community development funding because there's a lot of things that nobody is going to be incentivized to build if there's not a way to get paid for your time, I guess, is the best way to say it, just straight up. Like, people need to get paid for their work, especially if they're not a block producer, if they're just a strong developer in the community who could really add value to the network as a whole. How do they get funding for this project? Who should pay for that work? And I think one major thing to consider is, in an absolute doomsday scenario, whenever we talk about this blockchain, the EOS mainnet, we want it to go on forever. We don't want this to end next year, in 3 years or 5 years or 50 years. If we wanted to go on forever, we need to prepare for a worst case doomsday scenario. And that would be if Block 1 would turn their back on the mainnet and not make contributions any further. What would happen then? Rob?
Yeah, I mean, that's why... I don't know. I lean sort of against burning the 4% inflation in EOSIO.savings. Right now, that's effectively not real inflation because nobody can touch those tokens. They're out of circulation, and nobody will be able to touch them until we come to some kind of a consensus on what to do with them or what not to do with them, really. But I would almost rather see that 4% just locked off in perpetuity. That could then be used in the event that something like you're talking about happens, where let's say Block 1 goes off, they want to support a different project, maybe they stop releasing code updates. Obviously, there are some people within the community that contribute to the core code as well, but Block 1 is by far the biggest core code contributor. So if they go away, which I think is highly unlikely that it would happen. Right now that
we highly doubt this would ever happen, but we're talking doomsday scenarios here. So let's just...
I think, we could call it the Doomsday Fund, lock up that EOS or lock up half of the EOS or a quarter of the EOS, because there's really a lot in there right now, and basically say, hey, this is the Doomsday Fund in the event that we need to fund, core code development or some emergency patch or an audit or whatever the case may be. Keep that as a Doomsday Fund, just so that we don't run into the situation where it's like, oh shit, the biggest core contributor has pulled out, but now EOSIO.savings is empty because 4 years ago we voted to burn that and turn it off. So I'm just a little cautious of turning that off when we may need it in the future. But I totally understand the people out there who are going, whoa, 5% total inflation is too much. That I totally agree. But maybe we could reduce it and keep it as an emergency fund. But
I'm actually fine with burning it if we don't turn it off. So we're basically just hitting the reset button and saying, we think this is a lot of EOS. We want to just wipe it clean, but we don't want to turn that 4% off. And that could be because of a doomsday scenario. And maybe every year it could be voted on again. But once you turn off that inflation, there's never, ever going to be a way to go back. There's no way, if you ever wanted to increase inflation, especially adding a 4% inflation that may have been voted out, you'll never get that voted back in. So that's my thoughts on it. It's
important to note, rereading this proposal with the ID burn saving that says, should we burn accumulated unused inflation in EOSI.saving? It actually specifically says that this would keep the faucet going. It would just wipe it out. And then there would need to be a separate proposal in the future to change that inflation rate or turn it off or reduce it. So that's good. Yeah. Maybe I will vote in favor of that and kind of hit the reset button and let it accumulate more EOS, because it does accumulate a lot of EOS. Maybe it'll be good to, burn it, get it out there. And also from a, crypto marketing perspective, it wouldn't be the worst thing to have a regular token burn every 6 months or so, or every 3 months, where it's like, hey, that those 25 million EOS that were there, well, now they're gone. And, now your EOS are worth more in the grand scheme of things and have more CPU power and all that good stuff. So it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
BNB does something like that. They do a regular burn and everyone gets all excited about it, and it's like a big deal.
Exactly.
So what did you think of the volunteeristic approach written by EOS New York? Do you think
I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that's something I don't think really needs a referendum, because it's totally volunteeristic. Like, they can build that themselves and put it into place, and then block producers can, whether it's 8, 11, or 15, like they're outlining in their proposal, they can go out and say, hey, we want to put a bounty up for this specific piece of code, or we want a bounty for a new worker proposal system dashboard, whatever the case may be. And then if you want to donate, you can. My biggest concern, of course, would be that donations would not be very high.
Yeah.
However, if the amount is low, let's say, some proposals are between 100 and 1,000 EOS, I could totally see an event where if there's something that I'm passionate about, let's say there's a new feature that somebody wants to build and pay a developer to build, I could totally see myself funding some of that if it's not a lot of money, if it's like, a couple $1,000s. So I think there are probably other people out there in the ecosystem that would also be excited about certain proposals and get out there and actually put in the money to fund it. But I think if it's, stuff that's boring or maybe, hard for the average person to get excited about, I think those will probably struggle to get funding. But I would love, to see EOS New York go through with that and actually put out something like that, because that could also serve as a very, potentially successful version of the worker proposal system that doesn't touch inflation, is not base layer, which is sort of the main, qualms people have with it. Speaking
of EOS New York, I saw they posted a tweet today that they upgraded themselves to like a bare metal hybrid infrastructure. You want to explain what that is?
Yeah, so they're hybrid. It looks like they're still using some parts of the cloud. I think they were on AWS or something like that before, but now their primary infrastructure is going to be running on bare metal servers located in Africa, actually, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. It's kind of funny to say EOS New York in Africa, but it makes sense.
We're global.
If that's a place
we're all
that they
global
think
here.
Oh, absolutely. And if that's a place, I know they were big on looking at a map and seeing where other BP nodes were. And if that was a place that they thought, hey, there are not a lot of nodes here right now, obviously there is EOS Nairobi, and I think EOS Nigeria, maybe it is. There's another one that's based in Africa, but they're so far down the list. I don't even think that they're standby block producers right now. But it's cool. I think it's awesome to have another person join the bare metal club. Obviously, Cypherglass started out, even before the mainnet with bare metal infrastructure to make sure that AWS couldn't turn our servers off, to make sure that we had complete control over the infrastructure. But it's been so cool to see recently, not just EOS New York, but also people like Bitfinex switch to fully bare metal infrastructure. So now their node is running on it. They're good to go. I think even all of their infrastructure for their trading platform and for the upcoming EOS Finch decentralized exchange
I forgot about that.
Will now also be on that same bare metal. So that's super exciting. But huge shout out to EOS New York. Welcome to the bare metal club. Even though it's still hybrid, I think we can sort of consider you part of that bare metal club. So that's awesome to see more block producers reinvesting in the EOS ecosystem through infrastructure. So shout out to them.
Awesome. So I like the idea. So like you said, those other African block producers are not producing nodes, whereas EOS New York has never left the top 21. They're constantly producing. And having geographic diversity that allows the relays between the block producers to have like less mileage to go, it could potentially reduce latency. So isn't that kind of the value add of having a node in like where no one else does?
Yeah, I think, you're not really going to see a big difference with this. If anything, I think it might be more latency because there were no nodes there before to connect with. Although you do have EOS Israel up in Israel, so that's relatively close and maybe who they relay with. But right now, the way that relays are set up, so the way that block production work is there's a 12-second period where, block producer 1 is producing. And then another BP is picked and they produce 24 blocks in that 12-second period. But right now, it's not set up in a way to to minimize handoff latency, which is why sometimes, if I pass, if I hand off block production to the next block producer, they may miss a block if I have to go all the way around the world and it takes more than a half second for the data, the light to actually transfer there. You're limited by the speed of light in a lot of ways. So in the future, hopefully we will see a rework of that where we can maybe choose, geographically the order in which the handoffs happen. But right now, because it's also still kind of random, it may not make a huge difference, but bare metal should make a difference in their overall performance. And I believe in the announcement post that EOS New York put out, they actually showed a graph of their performance before, and you could see their performance after. And hey, now they're on bare metal, they're on this infrastructure that they own, and boom, it was like their latency dropped. So that was awesome to see, and really does go to show just how impactful bare metal infrastructure can be. When you own it, you can optimize it yourself. You can do anything you want with it. You can make the EOS network faster and ultimately give people more CPU power just by upgrading your infrastructure.
So as far to close out the geographic diversity, the blocks are chosen randomly, so that actually wouldn't even work. Even if you had everyone evenly split the whole way across around like the equator, let's say, it wouldn't matter because the producing node is just going to jump around and it's not going to take geography into a factor, correct?
Well, like I said, that's what I mean by hopefully there will be some kind of a rework in the future where we could, either manually pick it, although there are some security issues with that when it comes to DDoS attacks. But there has to be a better way for sure to do the handoff so that it's not jumping from, our node in when we're in the top 21, our node in Kansas City to then somebody in Hong Kong to then back to EOS Canada in Canada to then back to Hong Kong. There has to be a better way in my opinion, but right now, I mean, that's a sort of a small fish to fry. That's not a big priority. So I'm kind of pushing it off for the moment. So
really big dapp news. We like to talk about dapps on this show. EVA, who we've talked about before, they're the decentralized ride-sharing application in Canada. The city of Quebec just granted them authorization to operate in the city. That's awesome. Enormous. You've done a video on EVA before, so do you want to explain it to everybody?
Yeah, so the video I made on them last year was basically giving an overview of the platform, which is EVA Coupe. They're basically a competitor to Uber that incentivizes drivers, incentivizes riders in some pretty unique ways, but also charges lower fees than Uber. Most people don't know Uber started with just a 5% fee to drivers. So, the driver would get 95% of the fare. And over the last 5 years or so, Uber has actually increased their fee to 45%. So Uber is taking almost half of what the driver is trying to make, when in the past they were taking 1/20th of that. So the fees have come up, they're kind of crazy. EVA is trying to target that in a couple different ways, with incentivization, with lower fees, but it's been pretty cool so far. What I thought was interesting about this announcement was that when I made that video, they were actually waiting for this approval then, but basically said, screw you guys, you're taking too long. We're going to go ahead and launch the beta anyway. So they went ahead and did it. They had hundreds of riders. They onboarded a bunch of drivers. I think that was probably a good period for them to show the government, hey, this platform works, it's real. Drivers are using it that were previously driving for Uber. Now they also have their EVA app up. I think that's probably part of the reason why they now have the approval, similar to the Uber model, where Uber was, technically illegal and going against all these, taxi regulations and things like that. And they basically said, sorry guys, we're going to do it anyway. We'll get your approval later. Ask for forgiveness, don't ask for permission. So I think it's cool that EVA did it that way, and it's clearly working now that the Quebec government is officially authorizing them to go live, to, pull the lid off the beta and make it a real product.
Now, to close out the EVA talk, I just want to play a short video from the Blockchain Live event back in London in October, because it does a really good job of explaining how this is going to help with mass adoption. Bada boom.
EVA is ride sharing on the blockchain. It's very similar to Uber, except because we run on the blockchain, we can offer a much lower fare to the rider and a much larger share to the driver. It works on iOS and Android, very much like Uber. The user can search for their destination, select it, and the fare is presented in their local currency. They pay in credit card directly integrated with Apple Pay or Google Store as an in-app purchase. We issue them tokens. They issue those tokens to the driver at the end of the ride, and at the end of the week, the driver returns those tokens to us, and we exchange it for fiat so they can pay their bills.
So speaking of dapps, High Fidelity. You've been telling me you've been playing a lot of this game. First, why don't you introduce what it is, and then let's talk about your experience, because it sounds a little mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, so I've been in High Fidelity today for, 3 hours trying to explore this VR world. I'll fill you in on what I was doing, filming some videos for the Cypherglass channel that should be out soon. So subscribe to Cypherglass on YouTube if you're not already. But High Fidelity itself is basically a social VR platform. So there are other platforms like this that exist, namely VR Chat, which is one you can download on the Steam store. You can go in with your VR headset and you can sort of walk around and talk with people. And it's really immersive because if I'm in a group full of people and there are people behind me talking, it sounds like they're behind me, and I can turn around and look at them and wave to them, and it tracks my whole body in VR. So I had tried out High Fidelity before, but only on my computer. If you have just a computer or a phone, you don't have a VR headset, you can still walk around the world, but it is a totally different experience to actually be inside of virtual reality and feel like you're in this world. So I was playing around with it today, getting it all set up. It's pretty cool. I went up to this help desk when I first got there. I had my avatar. I was trying to get all set up, and they have a High Fidelity employee at the help desk at all times waiting to help you. So I walked up to this guy. I was waving in VR, and I filmed the whole thing. It's pretty funny. But he was walking me through different stuff. He took me to the bank and showed me how I can get some coins because I wanted to watch. All these people were wearing watches to see what time it was. And I was like, oh, I want to watch. How do I get that? Oh, well, I have to buy it from another creator. So if you want your High Fidelity coins, which will in the future, I found out, be a stable coin on EOS, you can go to the bank or you can go into the money tree. So he was walking me around. But what I did today, in addition to that, which was so cool, was VR right now is really made for experiences less than games. Like the best times I've had in VR are not playing games. It's doing some kind of an experience where you really feel teleported. You feel like you're transported to this totally different space, and then you have a cool experience in VR. And I had one of those today where we actually went on a tour of an Egyptian tomb with a real Egyptologist who does this for a living. She studies this stuff. She knows the history. And we walked down in the tomb. She's pointing out the paintings. They had all the paintings on the walls, like all the different artwork and everything within the tomb recreated just like the tomb in real life, but restored to what it would have looked like, had you been there right after they finished building it. It's not all faded away and everything. And she was pointing out the different images on the walls.
When you told me you were taking a tour of an Egyptian tomb, I didn't know how literal you were being.
Oh, very literal. Yeah, like an actual tomb. They went in and rebuilt, basically 3D scanned it, took photos of the stuff on the walls and recreated it. It is a recreation in VR of Nefertari's tomb, which was wild to see. Her tomb got looted. They could sort of add back some of the stuff that they thought was there before. But what was so cool about it was that I really felt like I was in VR. Like you had this real professional tour guide who does this for a living with a laser pointer pointing out stuff on the wall, and I could go walk up to it and move around, and it would track my head, and I could like look under this part of a table and see what was under it. It was just so cool to be there, not just with the tour guide, but with, I think it was about 6 or 7 other real people who took an hour out of their day to do this tour. So if you guys want to see more on that, it will be on the Cypherglass YouTube channel in the next week or so. And if you like it, I'm going to be doing a lot more deep dives into High Fidelity because they have tons of experiences, tons of live events that they put on to really show the power of this technology, and soon the power of EOS once they move a lot of the digital items over to the mainnet. But it was awesome. If you have a VR headset out there, if you have a Rift, you have a Vive, whatever, download High Fidelity and check it out because it is a one-of-a-kind experience, something that you'll never forget. It was so cool.
The crazy thing to me is I'm texting you before we started recording this, and you said you were playing High Fidelity, and I actually texted you to send you a screenshot of a tweet that High Fidelity posted. They retweeted something 3 hours ago from the time of this recording that they're actually doing a High Fidelity meetup here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on Monday night.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I guess Caitlin from High Fidelity is going to be giving a talk. So I'm going to video record it, hopefully get to talk to some people there, and hopefully put out a cool video on that. And that was a complete surprise. I'm pumped. Because I don't have,
they should have
all the VR stuff as you, so I've never gotten.
And they should have a VR setup
exactly.
for you, right?
I would think so. I'm pumped.
Yeah, that's awesome. Make sure you make a High Fidelity account before you go. I'm sure they'll have you log in. Although you could probably do it there very quickly if you needed to. But that's awesome. I'm glad they're doing real world events, and that's really the goal. When we first found out about High Fidelity, I think we kind of thought it was a game. We were like, oh, it's a VR world. You can go make your own domain and host people. But it really is more of a VR experience platform where, to your point about this real, seminar that they're putting on, I think High Fidelity's goal, their vision for the future is that they could see a Fortune 500 company, instead of flying all of their executives, from all places across the world to one conference, they could have a conference in VR. And for a price less than that of a plane ticket, they could buy everybody a VR headset and a VR setup and get them in there, in this virtual world where when I'm talking to you one-to-one, Zack, in VR, it feels like you're right in front of me and the audio is all matched up. If I turn to the left, I'm going to only hear you out of this ear. Like it's all
very immersive,
very spatially correct. So yeah, it's very, very immersive, especially when you're talking with other people, and everybody in the game is so friendly. So let me know how that event is. I'm excited to see that. I am
super excited. And I will let everyone know. But to take a step back to your tour. So it was a professional tour guide. So we talk about why blockchain is such a big deal. Why does the internet need blockchain? What difference does it make? So if you were just using High Fidelity as a regular user and this wasn't some beta test and you actually wanted to take this tour, from what you saw, wouldn't someone be willing to pay real money for the person's time that was spent to give you that tour? They're creating this value on the internet. So
and I think right now, I'm sure, High Fidelity, the company itself, is paying her to kind of make these initial experiences, but you're totally right. I mean, she could, once High Fidelity itself launches as a full-on platform, they're out of beta, all kinds of people are using it, she could give tours every day and say, hey, it's $10, $20, or a couple EOS, hop into my tour. I'm going to give you the real historic look at this thing from a real Egyptologist who has studied this stuff for decades. So she was so knowledgeable. There were people in there asking questions. She was making us guess what stuff was on the walls, and, a very fun experience. A lot of people laughing in there, but it was just so crazy because I felt the whole time like I was in the presence of these other people. It's very, very kind of shocking in a lot of ways to your system because you feel like you're transported to this new place.
I can't wait to check it out. I'm kind of jealous that you got to play it, but kind of not, because I would have to buy like probably two. I don't know. What's the minimum it would cost to get a VR setup to like just do the bare bones on this and have a good experience?
You're going to be spending at least $1,000 because you need, with the current Oculus Rift or the HTC Vive, you have to hook that up to a gaming computer that is VR compatible with, a good enough graphics card to run that. But then you also have to buy the VR headset itself. The Rift, I think I paid $350 for, and it comes with like the hand controllers and everything. But then obviously you need the laptop, and I'm using like a $1,500, $2,000 laptop. So, it is pretty pricey to get into VR initially. That stuff is coming down. HTC has a Go headset that's fully built in. The computer is in there. It's totally wireless. You just charge it. That's $250. I also have that, but I use that for like watching videos and stuff because it doesn't have the full body tracking that a platform like High Fidelity needs to work. So High Fidelity does not support the Oculus Go. If you're looking at getting a headset, you have to get the Rift or the HTC Vive. But I think in the future, they will likely support more VR headsets.
So it's a great marketing ploy doing these physical events then, because I sure as hell wouldn't be buying all of that stuff. But if this just blows my mind, then I'm really into it. It's something I'll maybe put down the line of something I may purchase. We'll see.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I'll be pumping out videos on Cypherglass. So even if you can't, if you don't put out the $1,000 or $1,500 to get the setup yourself, I'll have plenty of videos coming your way to sort of make you feel like you're there.
There's this like gaming business nearby, in the city, that they have Oculus Rifts. So maybe I can go there sometime. We could do an episode of everything EOS in the virtual world.
Yes, that would be so cool. We could have somebody build a set, and we could have a little table set up and record a whole podcast. And maybe even we could set it up ahead of time and do an event with High Fidelity where if you're out there and you want to come watch the podcast,
live audience,
you could be in there live or something. Yeah,
that would be awesome. It would be like at the Scaling Blockchain conference when we kind of did it in front of people.
Where people coming up and watching. That's so true.
Can't you like see it, like the road to mass adoption? Like it just seems like every week we're getting closer and closer. Like hearing like this stuff with High Fidelity, seeing that EVA got the approval of their government to actually operate this business that's going to create transactions on the EOS mainnet. Scatter, they just came out with a big update 10.1. So they added a couple of different features. I'll put the link in the description if you guys want to check it out. The feature I'm most pumped about is they included like an internal DEX within the wallet itself on Scatter desktop. And Scatter works with Ethereum, Tron, and all EOS chains. So what this DEX allows me to do is, let's say I only have unstaked EOS in my account, but I owe Rob, let's say 100 pixEOS tokens, but if I don't own pixEOS tokens, which I do, then I could actually have just the EOS in my account, and I could send Rob those 100 pixEOS, and it'll actually figure out what the cost swap is, and it'll send Rob the pixEOS tokens, and he won't ever. It just removes all of the friction. Yeah, you could do it from an exchange, but how convenient is it to not even have to leave your wallet to do these types of transactions?
Oh, absolutely. Well, and then for the average user, I think sometimes we forget just how complex an exchange interface is, even a decentralized exchange. Like I remember walking through my dad for the first time, like, oh yeah, when you want to, if you want to buy more EOS, you just take your Bitcoin, you send it here, you're going to deposit this, you're going to do that, you're going to come down to this. Like it's very complex for the average person who's never seen a chart before, who's never seen an exchange before, for them to understand how to convert tokens. So tools like Bancor obviously do this, but tools like Scatter that take it a step further and have it built into your wallet, I think are amazing because, it's going to sort of eliminate the need for a lot of the mainstream users to step outside of their comfort zone on an exchange when they can just do that exchange within their wallet. So this is pretty cool. And shout out to Scatter and the whole team over there for making this happen.
What I like about it is, let's say you used the Send EOS app around Christmas time and you sent a relative like $100 worth of EOS tokens. You set them up with a wallet, maybe you installed Scatter on their computer. they could now pretty much, if they found an application they wanted to play, they wouldn't have to know about what exchange they could swap. They could just say, okay, I need these tokens, and you could just do the swap within your wallet. You don't have to do it.
Wow.
I don't have to send it to Rob. I could swap my tokens internally. I could swap, let's say I want 10 EOS worth of karma or something. I could do that within the wallet. So it's nothing that couldn't be done by people like us and probably the people watching. But you got to think back to when you're first getting into this stuff, how complicated everything seemed. And it's really cool to see the friction slowly getting removed from each layer of every application, from wallets to decentralized Ubers to whatever is going to be next. So shout out to the Scatter team for making really cool tools. And speaking of which, I actually recorded a podcast with Peter Kay, also known as Bitkenstein. He's been using a lot of these tools, and basically we recorded a podcast of him talking about some of the ones he's been using that have really been shortening the time frames it requires for him to develop things. So he mentioned Defuse API, which is built by EOS Canada. He mentioned the Scatter.js and a product called EOS Studio, which only has about 55 people in their Telegram group currently. And he was really excited to share that with everyone. He kind of explains what value it brings, and he wants developers to start using it too because of how much time it shaved off of his development. So look forward to that.
That's awesome.
Next week. I should have it edited pretty early in the week, let's say Monday or Tuesday. But I'm excited about that because I am not a blockchain developer. I can't really talk about how useful these tools are except based on what people tell me and what I read on the blogs on the releases. So it's really cool to have someone's perspective that's using all of these different tools and picking all these pieces and putting them all together to just have a really efficient dev stack. So I'm excited to share that with everyone.
I'm excited to listen to that too. I haven't seen the podcast, obviously, so I'm just excited to hear it. I spoke with Bitkenstein earlier today. He's helping out with a little bit of contract work, but I know just from knowing him and knowing how much he's sort of dove in headfirst into the EOS ecosystem over the last couple months, I can't wait to hear what he's found out because it sounds like he's found some pretty instrumental tools. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
All right, so last thing we have to talk about, something we're both invested in for disclosure purposes. pixEOS was featured in Forbes magazine, or not Forbes magazine, Forbes.com. Yeah. And Bloomer actually, Brendan Bloomer actually retweeted it, which I thought was pretty cool because it means he sees what they're doing. I think they're doing amazing stuff. So you want to kind of introduce pixEOS a little bit?
Yeah, so pixEOS, if you haven't been following along these last couple episodes, it's an art gamification platform. So it combines a couple different things. It has a game that's very similar to Pixel Master, but has more longevity built in. It has an NFT, a non-fungible token auction house for art. So basically what an NFT allows you to do is, if you make a new meme, for example, Zack, if you're out there, you're putting together a meme and you want to say, hey, this is mine, I made it first before it goes viral. You can actually create an NFT, a non-fungible unique token for that meme and basically claim it as yours. You could even sell the original to other people and claim it as yours. But what's cool is you can also do that with physical artwork as well. So they'll have the ability in the future for you to, hey, I just made this painting. I want to track the provenance on the blockchain, which is a very big issue in the art and collectible space and actually gives artwork a lot of its value based on how good the provenance is tracked. But now you can take that physical artwork, track the provenance on the blockchain, and so much more. The platform really has a lot of interesting facets to it, but ultimately I think the pieces that people are going to use the most are the sort of Pixel Master style game and then, the NFT auction house. So I'm super excited about it. But Forbes was cool to see. I think the biggest reason why so many media outlets are picking up on this, this wasn't the first time. CoinDesk, who obviously isn't quite as big as Forbes, but is very big in the crypto community, wrote an article about them as well, which was good to see because they very rarely write positive articles about EOS. So to see them come out and write something positive about how this actually has the potential to, get us closer to mainstream adoption, it was very cool to see finally, them highlighting this. Forbes, of course, now highlighting that as well. Brendan Bloomer retweeting it. It's just so awesome to see people on board with pixEOS because I truly believe that the team behind it is going to do great things, that the platform is going to be very successful. Obviously, that's not investment advice, but I'm just hyped about it and excited to see what happens.
The thing that I was most impressed with pixEOS, and I waited until about 5 hours before the first round of pre-sale or whatever closed before I finally went in because we're in a bear market. I'm a very skeptical investor whenever I've been getting wrecked over and over again for months. So I've mostly just been holding my EOS and haven't even looked at prices or even thought about buying or trading anything new. But the buzz around this project is so real. If you're in any EOS Telegram group, you can't not see it because of all of these little 8-bit avatars you see. So everyone who's supporting this project has a special avatar, and they actually just made a tool recently. We'll put the link in the description that lets you make your own avatar to kind of blend in with everyone else. But before, I think the pixEOS team, they were actually making these picture avatars for anyone who would ask them for them. And what it allowed was, I mean, whenever you're in a Telegram group, all you see is people's profile picture and their name. And with the names, you usually see people who are involved with projects because like mine says Zack, Gall, everything EOS. But then you have your profile picture. And that's another way to show your support. And it was just so cool because I'd say, what do you think? Like 30-40% of the community had all changed their profile pictures to these little pixelated faces. It was unreal. Yeah. And it's kind of like a herd mentality. I was like, well, I know Rob has been telling me about the good things about the project. And the articles, and then the GIF contest, I think, was part of it too. So I made the GIF. So I had to get involved with it after the GIF. But when I say get involved, I'm more excited to actually use the platform than like helping them out with the pre-sale. I just wanted to support the project because it's still really early. The white paper has a pretty ambitious roadmap because the application that Rob mentioned with the NFTs is just one piece of what they're building. They actually have several applications that they're all kind of, how would you explain what they're, like an ecosystem is what they're actually trying to build.
Absolutely. So, yeah, it's really an art ecosystem on the blockchain. And to your point about all the different, people who have these pixelated avatars now, a lot of those people that are in the Telegram are artists who were not a part of the crypto community at all before Fred, the guy, one of the founders of pixEOS, basically got them interested in the project, and Stella Bell, who's done so much for it as well, and the rest of the team, of course. But that's when we talk about mainstream adoption, we're talking about these people who have never touched crypto before coming in and using it for the first time. And there are so many artists using or getting ready to use pixEOS and educating themselves on EOS, getting a wallet set up because of this new dapp. And the more people we can get that are making EOS accounts just to use a dapp or join a community, which is more of what pixEOS is, this collaborative art community, the better off we're all going to be when it comes to making EOS the blockchain platform of the future. So I'm excited about what they're doing. That's why, we at Cypherglass, we announced recently, as a collection of all the partners, put in about 35,000 EOS into the pre-sale. The reason we announced this was just to show, behind
like
the scenes,
transparency,
we're doing a lot.
Rob, because it's like we talk about a lot of projects on this show. Some of them we own, some of them we don't. Some of the stuff we mention the most is stuff I own nothing of, but I just support good projects. So I liked the transparency factor of you making that announcement, and it's there's other block producers who do similar things. Like some of them will announce before they make a big RAM purchase. I like that level of transparency from a block producer. So with those 35,000 EOS tokens, but then also the strategic partnership value that you bring also. Like, how are you supporting pixEOS? Why did you feel the need to share this information beyond just giving transparency to the situation?
Yeah, so we have I guess you could call it like a dapp incubation program at Cypherglass. So a lot of people don't know, we actually supported Monster EOS, which was the very first dapp to launch on EOS. It's kind of like a 3D version of CryptoKitties where you can, raise your monster, feed it, battle it with other people. Pretty fun, sort of proof of concept on the blockchain that I believe they're building out into a more, fully featured game. But we support them with things like, we bought some RAM for them. We run servers to keep their actual game online. We give them unrestricted access to the Cypherglass API to make sure all their transactions can go through on time. We do a lot to really help them out. With Monster EOS, we haven't really helped on the marketing side. And that's where, in addition to what we're doing for Monster EOS, we're doing for pixEOS, but we're also helping them on the marketing side, helping them with community. Ben and my brother, or not Ben and my brother, Ben, my brother, and myself both went to art school. Ben, though, is way, way, way more connected in the art world than I am. Knows tons of people, from his college, from the local art community, people who run other art businesses that we're talking to about, integrating with pixEOS in some way. So the real value add, other than the money that we put up, close to $100,000 that we invested into the pixEOS pre-sale, other than that, it's, strategic advisory on, or not so much advisory, but more of a strategic partnership on saying, hey, I like that part of the token economics. What if we could also add this to it to make it a little more appealing? Oh, what if we could add an incentive here? Ben is going to be a judge on an upcoming contest. I'm a judge on the gift contest. There's really a lot that we're doing to try to add as much value into the pixEOS platform as possible, but also more importantly, to get new people, new artists, new art businesses into EOS through pixEOS. It's kind of this art community on the blockchain. So that's really the value that we're adding. And we hope to add that value in other projects in the future by not only being sort of a marketing voice for the community to let people know this is happening, but also to add real strategic value, all of that other stuff that I mentioned. So we're super excited about it.
So you mentioned the GIF judging. So I just want to, for transparency, Rob had nothing to do with my GIF. I made it on my own. I speak for myself on this show. Anything I say or write or whatever, it's all me. I made the damn meme. Yep. I should be eligible to win if the other judges agree. Rob could abstain from that vote, but I want those damn 1,000 EOS or whatever the hell it is. I want those EOS.
I'll pass on that vote 100%. I think they're giving away, it's either EOS or pixEOS, but I do know that there are other contests coming in the future that will be for pretty significant prizes, probably the biggest prize that we've ever seen given away by an EOS dapp. So I'm excited about that. That's going to be very, very, very cool when that's finally released.
I think that's a good spot to close out. So basically, it seems like the theme of the show has just been mainstream adoption. How are we going to get there? What are we doing to help with that, help facilitate that? What's Cypherglass doing to help facilitate it? Shout out to pixEOS for sponsoring this podcast. We plan to have the same conversation whether they chose to sponsor it or not. But up until now, it's been Cypherglass as the only sponsor of this podcast. So it's nice to see a project that sees the value in what we bring to the community and actually helped support me in the show by sponsoring this episode. So shout out to pixEOS. Anything else, Rob?
I think the only other thing I would say is, just to echo your point, none of the content of the podcast changes when we do have an additional sponsor, whether it's Cypherglass or in this case, that pixEOS ad that you heard or watched at the very beginning. If you're out there, maybe you're running a dapp, maybe you run an exchange, whatever it is, if you're interested in advertising on everything EOS and having that very brief ad spot at the beginning of the podcast, please reach out to us. We're available on Telegram, t.me/everything_EOS. We would love to talk to you about it. Of course, we do turn down a lot of advertisements that we don't really believe in or we don't think fit with the show. But, if you're out there, if you're working in the EOS community and you want to advertise, please hit us up.
All right, so that's a wrap. Once again, I'm Zack Gall.
I'm Rob Finch.
And this is Everything EOS.
Go EOS!